And so my coach said, do what you know. Do what you know. And then just do Q&A, because honestly, that's where you're going to get the most out of me, is the questions you have. And so I have a few slides we can go through them, but I'd rather just open this up right now and just ask you, what do you want to know? I know I had a few questions beforehand, but what do you want to know about seller financing or this movement, or just how to think differently about money and relationships? Anybody have a question? Yeah, Michelle.
What has been the biggest obstacle you found in educating people on seller financing?
It's funny. I was just telling my hairstylist this a few hours ago. It is getting adults to believe in themselves. That is my greatest challenge. You can tell people information, but to get somebody to believe in possibility and to take the actions necessary, consistent enough to make that possibility happen, is a challenge. And it's not something I can control. I can teach, I can inspire, I can bring people in the room who have already done it, who have taught, but ultimately it's each person's decision and capacity to believe in themselves. And that part's the hardest part. Great question.
Great answer.
Yeah.
How are you sourcing your seller carrier financing deals?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of different ways. Over the years, it's been a mix of direct mail, I would say. Like when I was telling the story in the TED Talk, it's like a lot of the way that I break through the noise of today's very digital way of marketing to people is to write a handwritten letter. And so whether it be with a machine that is with a real pen, or whether it's my students don't have the budget for that, so they write it themselves, it's cutting through that noise with a very personalized letter. And it's signed, the address is signed, and what we found is you get a really great response rate, about 3 times what most marketing for real estate investors is. And it starts on the same note, right? Because seller financing, I think for a lot of investors, it's like, oh, that's never going to happen. It's so hard to find. But what most people don't realize is it's built, right? So if you're sending marketing that's all about you, here's a flyer, I spent 20 cents on you, and it's all like green and whatever. It's like all about me, and I'm going to close in 2 weeks, and I'm going to use all cash, and it's all about my strategy. Versus like, hey, I'm a neighbor down the street. I noticed your house. I love Tabor Park. I walk it all the time. I was wondering if we could get coffee sometime and talk about your house. I would love to buy it, even if it's not right now. I just want to get to know you, right? It's like that hits different. And then you sit in the living room and you start to build a relationship based off of collecting clues. You start to learn about that person's history, their grandkids' names, what their goals are for their life, and you deeply listen. This isn't like a, let me give you an offer situation. It's actually like dating. Right, multiple times. You wouldn't show up on the first date and be like, so I'm thinking about getting married, and I got the Bellagio lined up. What do you think? It's going to be like 50 grand. What do you say? Like, no. You're building a partnership. It's not a transaction, right? So you want to create a win-win, and that takes time and effort getting to know somebody, and it takes time for them to let their guard down because they're used to every other investor showing up and saying, this is what I want to do. And so if you take the time with people and you learn their story, you can. I like to tell my students, like, it's the difference between these two offers, right? The one with the flyer that's 20 cents and the person who puts together a card and sits in the living room. It's like the difference between walking into Men's Warehouse. You got like 100 suits stacked up and you put it on, you're like, yeah, I guess I'll do this, and you walk out with a bag and whatever. Or walking into a tailor shop and they got like that measuring tape around their shoulders, and they got their sleeves all rolled up, and they don't even have anything on the rack. It's all just like fabric. And they say, stand there, and for the next 10 minutes, they're touching every part you didn't think they could. And you walk out, you don't have anything in your bag. And you're like, what just happened? And 6 weeks later, they call you, and you're like, whoa, you made that for me? Wow, that fits perfectly. Wow, get rid of here. All cash, 2-week close crap. I've had sellers that I've talked to for 2.5 years, just getting to know them. Just asking about, hey, how's that bankruptcy going? How's your grandkids' wedding? Whatever, right? Getting to know their story. So when it came time that they're ready to sell, they call me, hey, I got a stack of 20, 30 investor letters on my table. I don't want to call any of them back. I just want to work with you. And so it's not about a quick deal. It's about getting to know real people. And the value is in how you construct the financing in such a way that it benefits both parties. So it's really coming from a different angle. A lot of real estate investing that I've seen is look for somebody who's down and out. They're going through a divorce or a death or something that's tragic, or maybe they've mismanaged something, right? And you try to take advantage of that moment and trick them into thinking their house is worth this much so you can make that much. And to me, that's just very short-sighted. If that's our way of doing things, then we increase homelessness, right? We increase the problems in our neighborhood that would make your housing value go down. There's people that can't afford to live because if we're extracting from communities all the time and not adding value, then that's short-sighted, right? But if you're going into it not with a win-lose, not an extractive model, not a transactional, I'm going to see how much I can get, what can I do, and you're coming from it from a partnership, right? You're looking for somebody who's actually very responsible, who has paid off their property over time, who has taken care of tenants for 20 or 30 years, and their concern is the tax liability. They don't want to sell, they're going to lose 20, 30% day one. And so they've been like holding on to this property, and Johnny doesn't want to fix things anymore, and they're struggling, and they're in this qualm. They don't want to get rid of a third of their retirement. And that's where you show up and you say, hey, can I be the landlord? How much cash flow are you getting? $2,000 a month? What if I just gave you a down payment and I paid you that $2,000 a month? And then I got the property performing again. And over time, I would start to get more and more income and the appreciation. And you can go from landlord to lender. You can sit back and enjoy your retirement and let me fund it for you. Let me take care of this. And it's that kind of authenticity of actually trying to find alignment with another human being, that value, that seller then becomes a lifetime lender. Right? It's not just that one transaction. Now you're their favorite call because you take them out to dinner every quarter. I mean, last time, what were we belly dancing with Kelly?
At a Lebanese restaurant.
At a Lebanese restaurant. That was the last time I took Kelly out. He's like trying to convince me to fly out to New York next week. I was like, I can't, Kelly, I can't. Susan was in the hospital in January. I'm the only person that sent flowers. Like deep, meaningful relationships with your sellers, because it's not about getting one over on them. It's about designing something that's mutually beneficial. And that's the paradigm shift I'm trying to create in the real estate industry in general, is how do we start to design things? Not the way that we've been oppressed, right? Not the way that we've experienced exploitation and interest rates and exorbitant, and it's difficult. Like, why don't we design a different system together? Humans together, not institutions. And yes, that takes expertise. It takes time. Right? It takes time to learn how to make a property cash flow, how to make sure you dot your I's and cross your T's and all that stuff, but it's worth the effort. As you all know, you're sitting in this room designing deals all the time, I'm sure. It's like you understand the value that brings to somebody else's life. Great question. I'm sorry, I just went on a monologue, but another question? Yeah.
What if you don't plan to hold it? What if you plan to flip it?
Yes, great question. So pretty much the seller can become your partner in that situation. So you can pay 12% and it's like due in 12 months and a hard money loan with 2 points and all the things, right? And then the seller basically gets cashed out by that hard money loan. And an alternative to that could be, hey, I could pay them 10% or I could pay you 8 or 9 and you get to make money during this flip. And at the end, we can either split the profits or I can just pay you like a lender. We can figure that out depending on how much work I'm having to do, how much you already have a great house. All of that can be negotiated, but then it involves the seller in the lending, and they get to make a little extra money, and you get to save on those costs. And again, you get to cut out the middleman. Yeah.
What is the number one obstacle that you get from people when you're cold approaching them to adopt a creative finance deal? Obviously, your marketing is probably softening them, so they're actually probably reaching out before you reach out. But in the instance where you do, like, what's the biggest or one of the bigger kind of walls?
Barriers.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let me share this slide because I think this will be helpful for you. Listening to clues. Okay, so these are some clues. These are some clues to listen for when you're trying to find alignment. So we'll talk about the red flags after that.
Sure.
But let's talk about when you're sitting with somebody, you're trying to figure out, is this the right person to date? Or am I wasting my time? Because you can scroll forever. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure you're sitting in front of the right person. So you're vetting them. You're trying to figure out, do they have equity to lend? Right? If they don't have equity, they're not going to be a good seller financer. That's not going to work. It's not going to be advantageous. It's not going to change the cash flow very much if they only have $10,000 of equity. It's like, okay, cool, $2 difference on the mortgage. Not good. they need to have it's helpful if they have a concern about capital gains, right? If they're going to have to lose 30% right off the top. If you think of Kelly and Susan and I's situation, it was a $700,000 triplex. My 5.5% interest only loan, which was killer, right? That cash flow day one with no money out of pocket, basically. That loan, because it was on the whole amount, not after taxes, on the whole amount, it competes with a 9% return if you had to pay taxes and reinvest it. So as a 67-year-old guy, he's looking at, well, I could cash this out, but then I have to go reinvest it at 9%, or, this dumpster diving social worker girl, she'll give me 5.5%, I'll make the same. And so it's a much more stable asset, especially for older folks who cannot take those risks in the market, and it helps them maximize their profit. Tired landlords, obviously they want to get out of the game, they don't want to do tenants, toilets anymore. If they enjoy passive income, as most people do, that's a really easy green flag. Not interested in a 1031. Right? If they're talking about doing 1031, get under that. Like, why? Is it because you enjoy the cash flow? Do you want to be a landlord? Because if you don't, you could get that without that. But if they definitely want to do a 1031, they got a property in mind, that's not gonna, it's much harder. You can do seller financing on that, but it requires the seller to have all of the money as a note to give you that money, and then they can 1031. It's not common. Unclear where they're going to reinvest. A lot of older folks are thinking of much more stable investments like bonds and CDs and that sort of thing. And so when you offer a 5% return and they're seeing 2 or 3, they're like, wow, that's really good. So if they don't know where they're going to invest it can be helpful. If they know about seller financing, that helps so much. So you're not sounding like snake oil, right? Like, do this scammy thing. If they know about it and they're familiar with it, which a lot of boomers are because it was so prevalent in the 70s and 80s, often Kelly, that was how he bought his first house, right? So he was very familiar with it. If you can find people that have had that lived experience or know somebody who has, it's very easy to talk about it as an advantageous thing, not a scary thing. And then concern about a big windfall. Like they say, like wealth skips a generation. And if you find yourself in that situation where they're kind of nervous about, when I pass away, Johnny's going to get all the money and what's he going to do with it? Who knows? Who knows? If you find yourself in that situation, may I present an estate plan of which Johnny only gets $2,000 a month for the rest of his life? Okay, great. So those are green flags. But what about red flags? If they need cash right now, like they have an intention for this, and I'm not saying they're moving from one house to another because whatever equity they have, they could just lend that part to you and they could get a bank loan same size for the next house. Not that situation, but if they literally need all of their cash for something, then they're not going to be a good candidate. Little or no equity, we talked about that. Wants to reinvest. That's funny. Immediately. That's right. Fear without curiosity. So yeah, if they've never heard of it and they're just really afraid, that's a long game. You're going to have to really spend some time with them and sort of give them other points of contact where they can be more curious. But if they're really afraid of it, it's probably not going to work out. And then heirs can be really tricky. If it's one heir, sure, you have one conversation, but a lot of times it's 2 or 3 kids. And so one kid might be on board and the other 2 are like, no, I want my money right now. And so that can get tricky. It can be more complicated. It's not impossible, but it is harder. It's a red flag. And then, of course, like lack of mental capacity. A lot of the people that you would probably do seller financing with are going to be older. And so it's crucial to make sure that they understand the conversation. And if they're older than 65, like just invite either an attorney or an adult child or a friend. Have somebody else in that room. Because if you're truly doing something that's win-win, there's nothing to hide. And the last thing you want is after the deal closes, somebody calling you and accusing you of taking advantage of their mom. That's like a quick way to go to jail, even though you didn't do anything wrong or lose your license. Or I've heard horror stories of that. So be very careful. Consent is important, just like in lots of other parts of life. And we don't take advantage of people who are vulnerable, right? So lack of mental capacity is a big red flag.
I have a question. What is enough equity?
Yeah, I kind of hover around that, like at least 40%. If you're going to try to like create some numbers or some sort of cash flow, you need at least 40%, I think. But I aim for more like 60, 70, 80, depending on how much money or accessibility to other types of capital, it's going to vary for each person. Like I had to get 100% equity with Kelly, right?
Yeah.
But if you're bank worthy, maybe you can get a bank loan and wipe out their bank loan, and then they can support the rest. So any amount that they have, they can lend to you, and you can work and finagle that. And if they're holding a second, often you can pay them higher because it is a higher risk. But yeah, that's a great question. I can tell you some cool case studies too if you want. Yeah.
Do you teach also like people with money to become a bank and to seller finance, or you're
Yeah.
more than, like just a person to get a seller finance, but
Yeah,
on the
I've
opposite side?
I've had some sellers join my program, surprisingly,
Yeah.
and they have been ecstatic. One of them calls me my $1 million friend because they have a $1 million fourplex, and I teach a thing in the program of how to double when you own the property free and clear. I'll teach you how to double that money, and so yes, but I haven't attracted as many. My program's built mostly for buyers. 'Cause that's the
One
position.
woman has seller financed 18
Oh,
of
yeah.
her own homes
That's
to
true.
other people in Cleveland.
Yeah, one of our students has seller finance
Wow.
18 of her own.
Like
homes.
even if you don't have like property, but you have money, and then like
Oh, yeah.
it's just like
Yeah, you can privately lend.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you could privately lend. I mean, I think that's what's beautiful is there's a lot of people that have time, and grit and energy and like to get out there and they can go find the deal. And if they can partner with somebody who might have a more, high paying job, but they don't have the time because they're, tending to that, that's a great partnership. And so, yeah, I actually encourage, and I see that in my community too, people partnering that way. So it's a great way to do it. And I hope to eventually create a fund like that where people can lend within our community. Yeah, Caitlin.
Kelly seemed like the perfect situation. Did you have any lessons learned from that situation?
Oh yeah, after we closed, I sent the the tenants paid there's only one out of the 3 that were rented, and the first rent came in, and I was like, that's $100 off. And Kelly's like, oops. Kelly, you don't have a lot of money, remember? But that was fine. It worked out. It wasn't a big deal. With that particular transaction, no. And here, okay, let's talk about some cool stuff. So this triplex is not what I could share on the stage in 15 minutes and to such a big public audience, but gotta keep it like 5th grade level. But you're not 5th grade level, so let's get into it. So that triplex actually turned into 20 more units. So one of the really cool things when you're building a deal with somebody else and you're controlling the paperwork and it's an agreement with just you and one other person, then you can design those terms in really particular ways that allow you to make your debt mobile. And so that might seem strange at first if you haven't heard that concept, but basically you can recollateralize a note. And sometimes you can do that like in development, right? They'll allow you to like recollateralize or split off a lot or something like that. But with the seller, you can explain like, Kelly, I love this triplex, but our note's 10 years and maybe I'll get sick of it after 5 and I want to sell it. Could I keep paying you? Would that be okay? Could I move that note that we have onto another real piece of property as long as it has sufficient equity and cash flow to support that note? Would that be okay with you? Because I'd love to keep doing these payments. It's going to support you in your retirement, but I might not be in love with this property forever. Sure. And so you build that in. That's called a substitution of collateral clause. But you might not have $700,000 of equity in a property, right? So kind of hard to move that note. Well, then you have the exchange of notes clause. So imagine you have a $10 bill. You could do 10 ones. You could do 2 5s. You could do 5 $2 bills. You can exchange one note, $1 million note, the same way. You could have 10 $100,000 notes. You could exchange it for 2 $500,000 notes. You could change it for whatever. So in this case, what I did is I said, this is like 2020, interest rates had dropped significantly. So my 5.5% interest rate looked really bad. And so I called Kelly and Susan up and I said, I don't like this deal we did. I didn't get a good deal. I know I paid $500, but the interest rate. And they said, okay, what would you like to do? Now at this point, I've been paying for 3 years. We're in deep friendship now. They know my portfolio. They know what I'm doing. We are, I think we're even investing in other properties together at this point. So I called them up. I said, hey, can we get creative? And they said, sure, we like your creativity. It's made us a lot of money. I said, okay, well, I'd like to take that $700,000 note and I'd like to chop it into 2, one for $350 and one for $350. And I'd like to keep one of them on the subject property, that triplex that I bought. But with your permission, I'd like to move this other one. I'd like to substitute the collateral and put it onto another duplex or 2 that I have. And I showed them the comps. I substantiated there's plenty of equity, plenty of cash flow, and because you're doing this, I'll give you an extra point of interest just for helping me out. And so they agreed. And then what did I have? I had a triplex with only $350,000 of debt on it. And what did I do then? I did a cash out refinance because I do use bank loans. I know, judge me. I did a cash out refinance at like 4.25%, 30-year amortization. I feel like I was stealing from the banks because, inflation. And I was able to pull out $205,000 from that triplex, of which I put on a 20 unit in Ohio. And that was also a seller finance transaction, a wrap note. And so I take $500 and I had 23 units, cash flowing pretty good. And after 3 or 4 years of owning that property, I sold it and made $425,000. And so being able to move and manipulate the debt inside your portfolio by calling one of your best friends, because you've made them your best friend because you have supplied their retirement, and their stockbroker's not taking them out for dinner every quarter like you are. They don't care when they're in the hospital, right? You have a relationship with them. You can call them up and say, hey, do you want to do something different? I have this opportunity, and if I shuffle the debt this way, and this way, we could seize that opportunity and keep growing. And they become a beautiful part of your business, and they're stoked because they get to tell their friends they're doing all these really cool things that they don't actually know how to do at all. But they get to be a part of it, and that makes it really special.
That $100 off you mentioned earlier, was that because you didn't provide the rent roll?
I was like so new to real estate, I forgot to be like, can you show me the lease?
Oh,
I just
okay.
took his word for it. Now I would definitely get an estoppel and ask the tenants first, but I was like the same age as the tenants, so it was awkward.
Are you using an attorney for all this?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I use Sean Morgan. He's a local attorney. He's actually the attorney that's supplied the forms for Seller Finance Academy too. And he's got a portfolio of 75 doors. He does a lot of his own creative work like this. I worked with him for a few years when I first got into real estate, and I was kind of in the trenches of meeting with sellers every day and all that. He's very well versed. Great attorney, Sean Morgan. Yeah. I'm trying to think of something else. So you can use this in really cool ways too. For instance, even as a realtor, last year I had an interesting case study where this woman, Cynthia, gave me a call. And now Cynthia told me her mother just passed away. And she had a duplex and a triplex that she left her. And she told me they were free and clear. So I knew before I even went to the listing appointment. By the way, I'm a top broker. I'm just getting out of that. To focus on seller finance. So I show up to her house and I was going over all the comps and stuff, and I'm like, I think the triplex is worth this and the duplex is worth $550. And she agreed. And I said, great. Cynthia, how would you like to make a lot more than $550 on that duplex? She was intrigued. I said, how would you like to make $610? She said, yeah, how would we get there? I said, well, the reason we can only sell this for $550 right now is because a buyer putting 25% down at 7% interest rate, they are going to be break even on this property. They can't afford to pay any more. But if you supplied the financing and we did interest only payments, well, the payment drops by 1/3 and we can shoot the price up by 10%. And the buyer will still save hundreds of dollars on their mortgage every month. She said, that sounds like a great idea. And in fact, she knew seller financing because her parents had sold a grocery store when she was younger. And that she remembers her dad being really involved with this grocery store, and they sold it, and all of a sudden he went from landlord to lender, and they had a really cush life and he didn't have to work anymore. So she understood the concept. It was not new to her. And she said, I know who the buyer should be. She said the tenant, his name's Abdul, he's been living there for years, and he always talks about having his mother move into the mother-in-law unit of this duplex, or the second unit. But he has one problem. He's a doctor. He makes $350,000. He's very qualified. However, he's Muslim. And his religion bars him from paying interest. And so he can't get a bank loan. It's not possible for him. I said, oh, that's not a problem. Can I call Abdul? I think I could get this under contract for us. So I call up Abdul and I say, Abdul, how would you like to buy this duplex with a 0% interest loan? Yeah. I said, great. And so I said, how many years would you like to pay this off over? And he said 7. So I just, grabbed a napkin with some calculator on my phone and was like, okay, 7% over 7 years would be roughly this much. And I said, great. And I told him the amount. He said, I'll do that. Sounds great. He picked the amount that he put down and all that. And I called up Cynthia and I said, Cynthia, how would you like to sell this? Not for $550, but for $725. Yes. Great. Then we have mutual agreement. And that's how we closed that deal. And that's what's so beautiful about seller financing. You can manipulate the terms, the price. I mean, I think I have one of these slides here. When you're negotiating, there it is. When you're negotiating, I like to think about it like 4 levers. 4 levers. You got interest rate, down payment, length of the term of the loan, and price, which is the seller's favorite, right? You have these 4 ingredients, mainly. There's lots of other little nuances to negotiate, but these are the 4 big levers. So when you're meeting with somebody, you're really trying to identify, what do they care about? Usually it's price for sellers, but occasionally it's interest rate or something like that. Or maybe they have a goal, they need to get the money back soon. So you start to favor them on that lever, but then you start to pull one of the other ones for yourself. Right? So, okay, you want a high price? Well, I can do a high price as long as we have a long term. Because if money's losing value, I don't know if you noticed, over time, I'm going to get the appreciation. I can weather that storm. But if you want a high price, we got to have a long term. Okay, great. Well, I also don't like having a large down payment, but I can pay you a little more interest rate. Would that be okay? As long as it cash flows. Interest-only payments, I'm in. Or maybe they want a large down payment. Great, I'll give you a large down payment, but then you got to work with me because I need my yield to be good. So I need a low interest rate so I cash flow. Right? So we just pull these levers back and forth until we find something that just is that custom tailored suit. It feels good on both parties. And so you're just picking up clues. You're talking to them. You're trying to understand their goals. You're trying to create something that would be really appealing to them. And then you start to mix in all those fun things like a delay of first payment or beneficiary. You know, who's going to get this? The remainder beneficiary. Who's going to get this if you were to pass away? That's a fun conversation. Their stockbroker's not asking them that. Like, do you have a charity you love? Do you have some kids that you want to leave this behind to? How would you like your legacy to look? Let's design that together. Because you get to choose, right? It's so fun. Like, it's just creativity. And as much as you can think outside of the box, as long as at the center of it is alignment. That's really all you're looking for, alignment. How can we design this in a way that works for you and for me? As long as you're doing that, it's a good deal.
Cash flow that you're looking for typically. I mean, I know every deal is different and everything, but you're not going to want to just barely cash flow.
Yeah, so it depends on the deal. Like, one of the things that I teach my students is the 3 laws of a good purchase. You want to make sure it's a good location, of course, right? Like, we know that one. And you want to make sure that there's expandability, because we're investors. We need to actually bring value in some way, whether that's adding a basement or, you know, doing midterm rentals or something. There needs to be a way to expand what's already happening. Otherwise, it's not an investment. And so to answer your question, there's that aspect. And then, of course, designing the terms. And so when you're the one that's designing the terms, yeah, maybe in the short term for a couple months, you know, you're stabilizing a property or you're doing something, but long term, it benefits the seller that you cash flow. So whereas there's like a transactional relationship with the bank involved, it's like, I'm going to win. You don't want that. If I'm negative cash flowing, it's your security instrument that you're harming. So let's not do that. So we need to design this in a sustainable way. We need to have like realistic expectations for market fluctuations, for rents and all that stuff. We need to build that in so it's a sustainable deal for you and me, because our retirements are tied to each other. So it's a different kind of conversation.
I like that explanation. It's very good. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Great questions. I'm trying to think of other fun little stories to tell you. And when it's designed, yes. Yeah, Cynthia and Abdul, go look at me. Yeah, making debt mobile. That's probably the funnest one, honestly. As a more experienced investor, when you actually are good at finding the deal, negotiating it, things are cash flowing, you have a good sense of the market, you're not risking the other person's livelihood, like you understand you have competency, then you can start doing really fun things and moving debt around in your portfolio and chopping it up and seizing opportunities and bringing your sellers along. I had a situation, it was kind of like a double seller finance situation. I had been waiting like 2 years to get into the syndication that was just like killing it, like 25%. They were like a bunch of Mormon guys out of Idaho that don't drink and don't do anything bad, so they got lots of time to focus on their portfolio growth. And fantastic syndication. And so they were doing great, but there's a wait list to get in there, right? And so I waited 2 years, and I remember I was in the middle of this fourplex transaction, and I get this call, and it's my mortgage broker. And she's like, hey, I know you just released $16,000 of earnest money because you were so sure of yourself, but unfortunately the PMI company said you own too much property. We're not going to finance you. So if you could just come up with an additional $188,000 for closing, then we can still close. But otherwise, sorry, your $16,000 is gone. oh my gosh. And at the same time, I open up my email and I see this email from Alturas, which is the company, and they say, we're ready to take your 200,000 now. 188, 200,000. I was like, I can solve this problem. And by the way, I had only maybe I could scrape up 200,000, so I had to double it. And so I thought really hard. I was like, okay, well, Kelly and Susan, they like to give me money. I was like, hey, Kelly and Susan, if you put in 200 and I put in 200, we get an even better rate, and we can do this syndication together. They're like, cool. And so I still had to solve the 188,000. And so I called up the listing agent and I said, hey, how would your seller like to seller finance 15% to me? And then I wouldn't have to pay for PMI, which he'd given me like $16,000 to pay off that PMI. I said, and how about I just give you a really great underwriting fee of like 6% on $188,000? And he was like, yes. So that's how I solved it. I was me 5% down, him 15% down, and the rest was on a bank loan. And another really cool term that you'll want to put into your notes is first right of refusal. So on that transaction, a year later, it's a 10-year note. He calls me up and he's like, I got to cash out. I want to build this hotel in Vegas. And I need my money right now. Now, actually, he didn't call me up. I was snowboarding in Tahoe. And I got a text message from the seller a year later. He's like, hey, would you mind cashing me out? It's $188,000 that you owe me, but I'll take $150. So I wrote back, how about 100? And he said, how about 110? And I said, great. And then I literally picked up the phone, called Kelly and Susan and said, hey, would you like to earn 8% on a $110,000 loan on this second position? This seller wants to get cashed out and you like making money. And they said yes. And so I text my escrow officer, and as I get down to the lodge, I had done a refinance on one snowboard down. It's like when you have those relationships built in, an opportunity presents itself and you've built it into the contract that you get the first right to buy your own debt. When somebody's in a hustle and they need that debt paid off fast, then you get to be the beneficiary of that. And that seller was not mad about the situation, by the way. He hired me like 2 months later to sell a condo for his mom. So he was not like, you took money from me. He was like, thank you, you're awesome. So many things you can do when you design the term yourself. It's very powerful. Good question.
How long does it take to learn how to do this now?
Time, yeah. In the academy. So what I do is 3 months of education, just like pouring in all these concepts and ideas. And a lot of our students are brand new to real estate, so we really got to teach them bottom up. And then we try to get them active, just talking to sellers, getting to know people, starting these conversations, getting through the fear of rejection. That's all it is. No, I mean, I've walked into some shady places, but I've never been harmed by a seller. Yeah, and then I would say a year. Yeah, like somewhere. Most of the students that are really serious, they're in conversations. I mean, Joel's in conversations now. You started
October.
Yeah, October. So 4 to 6 months in, you're in conversations. We have 2 or 3 people that closed from October's cohort or September's cohort. So it takes 4 to 6 months usually if you're really active and you're getting to it. Some of our students, they got a lot going on, so it's gonna take them a year. So whatever, we'll be there for them until they get it. But for me, I was all in on this. I quit my day job. I was doing 10 hours of cold calling. You asked other ways. Cold calling, talking to realtors whose listings are stale and you can tell they have equity. I picked them up door knocking. There's all sorts of ways to meet people. However you would meet people, it's just that. And go to bingo nights. I bet you find a whole lot of sellers in that room. My roommate would go to what he called Beethoven Church, where they would play classical music on Sunday mornings. And I walked in there one time and I was like, this is all the sellers in Portland. It was all white hair. I was like, whoa. I gotta leave. This is too much. I'm gonna be too motivated in the wrong way. This is supposed to be about the music, not negotiating. But yeah, just finding people, building relationships with them however you want. I found that direct mail is the most passive and easy way to do that. Yeah.
Can someone use their primary home's equity to do seller financing?
Yes, Sorsha, you definitely can. You are okay. I want to tell Sorsha's story because
that wasn't where that was.
No, if it's okay, can I share it?
That was a good question.
Yeah, it is. Can I share your story?
Yeah,
So I just learned this week that I have to say something like this. Results may vary. And she's an exceptional student. And this will not be your future. And I'm not telling you that my program would produce this. Okay, now there's that. This is an illustration of how you can use one of these concepts. So Saoirse came to me. Matt, her husband, had just lost his job or was struggling. Software developer, like everybody else who is a software developer is now facing. And she wanted to start a property management company doing like midterm Airbnb kind of stuff. And she's like, I don't know how to buy property. Like, I don't make very much money. I'm trying to figure it out. What can I do? And I was like, well, what do you have? She's like, well, I got an Airbnb in my backyard. I got a few clients that I've been doing this midterm stuff with. I think I want to make this model like my business. And I said, okay, well, how much is your rental making in your backyard? She said $1,500. So I was like, okay, great. So when you're calculating lendable equity, it's really just two things. It's the amount of equity that you have. Don't go to 100%, right? That's not ethical. If there's a foreclosure or something like that, then you gotta shave some off the top. So 80, 90%. And there needs to be cash flow, $1,500. And that tells you the size of the garage, if you will, that you can park your loan in, as a good analogy. So she had $1,500 garage. And what, $50,000, $60,000 of equity? Something around there.
I think I had like, I thought it was like 80.
Yeah,
Yeah.
plenty of equity. $1,500, 80,000, and you raised 40, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I taught her this process, and she's like, "Are you kidding me? I'm gonna go ask a bunch of people for money?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." But you're gonna show them a business plan, right? You're not just gonna be like, "Please give me money. I'm selling expired yogurt." No, you're gonna show them a business model and how they can participate, because they're very lucky to have the opportunity to work with somebody like you who has spent all this time, effort, and energy developing yourself and your capacity in this way to be an expert. So she raised $40,000, and she wanted to, reach out. I hope this is okay. Reach out to condo owners, and started asking them, "Hey, you're having a hard time selling. I don't know if you noticed, but everybody and their mom developed two bed, whatever.
1.5 bath.
Yeah, 1.5 bath. Thank you. 2 bedroom, 1.5 bath condo all over Portland. I don't know if you noticed, they're everywhere. And so all the people who have condos are struggling because they're competing with that, whether they're selling or renting. They're all like, oh man, mine doesn't look like that. And yet, so a lot of those folks sitting on the market, and she started having conversations, Facebook Marketplace, letters, whatever, just meeting people and saying, hey, I see that you're having a hard time selling this. You're having a hard time leasing this. Would you lease it to me? Would you lease it to me? And she got some yeses pretty quickly, actually. And people were willing to do that. She's like, great, lease it to me. I'll be the property manager, and I will re-rent it furnished for 60% above market rate, right? So
I didn't tell them that.
yeah, of course, that's not part of the meeting. She's solving their problem, not telling them how she's going to monetize it.
I'm not gonna skip.
Yeah, don't
out
kiss
on
and
it.
tell. That's rude to the person you're dating.
Yeah.
And so basically, she's taking them at like $2,000, putting $5,000 or $6,000 of furniture into it, and then re-renting it around $3,000, $3,500. So a really nice $500 to $1,000 spread.
Yeah, average spread was 800.
Yeah, average spread, there we go, 800. And she did that the first time. I was like, whoa, that was easy. I was like, yeah, now go do it a bunch of times with $40,000 from your Airbnb, right? Now you figured out the model. Go involve friends and family in the model, and now you use other people's money to create your own cash flow. And so in 6 months, she did that 6 times and turned $40,000 into $45,000 of passive annual income. Results may vary in my program. This is not the standard result. I am not advocating that my program always produces this. Please don't sue me for that. But exceptional student in my program, honestly. Beautiful model, and has gone to build like one of the largest midterm rental property management companies in Portland now after that. So I'm very proud of her. So cool. So cool. But to show you don't have to have money. Your husband can be unemployed. You can be scraping by with a rental or two, and you can use creative financing models to get out of that situation if you are willing to put in the work and build those relationships and literally just solve other people's problems. That's the core of this, is solving other people's problems. I'm probably talking too long, and I just want to end with one last story, if it's okay, because I know I like to read.
Of course it's okay.
It's okay. Okay. I like to make everybody cry. I like to get into these things. By the way, if you want a free strategy call, you guys are all investors. But if you want support in doing this, I do have an academy. You can do a free strategy call with them. Whatever. I've plugged myself. Okay. So when I first was learning about financial literacy, it was a very strange place. I was actually living in a slum in Kolkata in my early 20s, helping women out of sex trafficking. very different lifestyle. And I was there trying to understand, like, how do you break generational poverty amongst some of the poorest people in the world, people living on $1 a day who are extremely oppressed. And so I started studying different famous theorists around this, and I stumbled across this guy called Muhammad Yunus. Anybody ever hear of Muhammad Yunus? No? Okay, great, I love that. So Muhammad Yunus was this college professor, like in 1986, at the School of Bangladesh, the University of Bangladesh. So you can imagine he's a professor, and he's in this classroom, and he's sort of teaching people in ivory towers, while just outside the gates of the city, people are literally starving. Right? He's teaching economics. So one day he decided, I want to see outside these pearly gates. I want to understand what real people are going through. And he went to a village nearby named Jorba. And he sat with this woman, and she was making little bamboo seats, like little stools. And he started asking her, how much money do you make each day? And she said, just a few cents. He was shocked. He said, well, how long are you working each day? She's like, oh, long hours, 10, 12, 13 hours. He's really confused. He's looking at her product. It's clearly very good. And he's like, I don't understand. Why don't you make more money? She's like, oh, well, it's because I can't afford the $5 a day that it would cost to buy bamboo in bulk. So instead, I have to use this predatory loan shark who charges me exorbitant interest and eats all of my profits. Oh, okay. So then he went around all the village, right? He's talking to all these different women who are making different things, and he asked them, do you know what it costs to liberate 42 women in a slum in Bangladesh? $27. $27 in 1986. So right then and there, he decided, all right, let me get my wallet out. And he gathered these women together, and he started forming little small groups, little micro-lending groups. And he gave them money, and one woman would use that to buy whatever she needed in bulk and start to build her business until she had enough capital to pay the group back. And over time, these financial literacy groups, his belief was that if you taught the poor how to think about money differently and then put them in a context where they were accountable to other people, he predicted that they would be very good borrowers. And for those of you who don't know, in third world countries, people who are impoverished, they do not get a bank account. They're not allowed to have that, right? They're locked out of that system. And so they had no other choice. And so he was basically providing a pathway to building their businesses. And sure enough, they paid every dollar back, which proved that the poor were a very good investment if they had these two ingredients. And so he went on to form what's called the Grameen Bank, which has lent billions of dollars to millions of women all around the globe who are in poverty like this. And I say that because as Americans, I don't know if you've noticed, but like all of our life is like interest. Like our cars, our student loans, our credit cards, our payday loans, right? Obviously our housing. So much of our budgets each month go to interest, and it's not that different. One of the things that I love that he says, that I think applies, and it really sort of summarizes my mission as well, is that the poor are not a financial risk. They're a financial revolution. If only someone would trust them first. And I just want to leave you on that note. That's all we're trying to do is rebuild the fabric of our society through trusting and loving relationships where we deeply are invested in one another's outcomes. And I deeply believe that if we could teach people that skill set, that we could repair more than just our financial budgets. So I'll leave you with that.